How's it going guys, Chris here, and in this guide we're going to be checking out all the different bosses you'll encounter throughout Chapter 3 of Black Myth Wukong. So pretty early on in the chapter, you'll run into the Macaque Chief, a recurring boss that pops up to fight you at several different points in the region. Despite being armed with a big nasty blade while having a bit of a wild nature, you're probably going to be the tougher monkey of the two, with the Macaque Chief being a fairly simple, straightforward opponent who doesn't exactly have a lot of health or power to pose too much of a problem. That sword swinging and slamming around can still potentially slice you up if you're not careful, but with most of this monkey's attacks being fairly predictable and easy to dodge, along with him also being prone to getting staggered a lot, you'll have plenty of time to get some good combos going in between his own, ripping through that health bar in no time at all. After you defeat the Macaque Chief for the first time, he's going to abandon the fight and vanish into the air, probably because he's just got his butt kicked. Though you'll bump into him again a little bit later on, where he can be seen pestering a guy chilling out inside an impenetrable ring of fire. Being a bit wound up about not being able to hack the guy to pieces, the crazy monkey's going to take his anger out on you instead, basically putting you through a very similar fight to before, only this time with a little bit less space to move around, making it slightly harder to keep your distance from that swishing blade. You've beaten him once already, and you'll probably be familiar with the way he likes to jump around and strike, so this second fight's probably going to seem like a bit of a doddle. Though being the cheeky monkey he is, the Macaque Chief's going to poof himself away from the battle once again. Then we'll get to catch up with him a little bit later on. Once you get to Mirror after meeting the Keeper of the New West, you'll come across a massive frozen lake with a building randomly plopped in the middle of it. As you get a little bit closer to the building, a smug little Buddha kid's going to come walking out, release a really mean looking dragon from his little bag, and then disappear along with the building, now leaving you to deal with that dragon that's casually floating around above the lake. How unfortunate. Well, this happens to be Kang-Jin Loong, a Yao Guai queen who's opted to commence battle in her creature form, being a white flying serpent style dragon with an elongated body and the ability to fly around above your head and keep herself suspended in the air throughout most of the fight. Kang-Jin Loong might be fast and ferocious, having access to some powerful slamming strikes and dash attacks, but the main thing that's probably going to give you a headache is actually hitting her back. She might be a pretty big target, but she's a pretty big target that's hovering around above the ground, often out of reach of that staff of yours. Not helped out by her constantly whooshing around the place and switching positions, making her a really bloody awkward boss to actually deal damage towards. You will get some good opportunities to strike, like when she gets her tail lodged into the ice after a slam attack for instance, but for the most part you'll mainly be dodging her rampaging around the place, while using those claws and tail to smash her around as she whips past. Often throwing a few ranged attacks into the mix like ice breath and electrical strikes, typically from a safe distance and sometimes high above your head. Kang-Jin Loong is definitely more of an endurance test for your survivability, as you'll need to be patient and be ready to strike at those opportune moments. Sounded like some sort of crappy MCU character that nobody's heard of, the next boss we'll face is Captain Lotus-Vision, who's not a particularly difficult opponent, but boy is he a bloody annoying one. After falling down from a ledge right next to the upper pagoda shrine in the prison area, you'll drop into a bit of an ominous scene, with a load of creepy dead guys kneeling down in front of a godlike statue. It's not long until said statue comes alive, turning the place into a hectic light show, spewing out purple energy balls and lasers to constantly wear you down over distance. This alone can be an irritating tactic, but throw in the ability to phase around the arena too, while also being able to summon those undead minions to distract you from all those deadly projectile showers, and you've got yourself a pretty pesky package, having all those devious tricks to try and get the better of you. You'll spend most of the battle chasing Lotus-Vision down, while trying to avoid everything that gets launched your way, which is essentially a hell of a lot of energy balls and beams, generally being spammed at you in multiple different ways. Sometimes you'll get blasted away while the boss hovers around at the front of the room, other times you'll need to jump over beams travelling across the floor, and then of course there's the times where he'll make the whole place look like a hardcore rave. But thankfully this pesky bugger doesn't have a ton of health, and your spells should at least help to ease some of that torment. A much more formidable foe comes in the form of Captain Wisevoice, our next boss encounter that can be found at the top of the pagoda. This is another ancient spiritual creature, though definitely a lot weirder looking than the last one, towering over you with those long gangly legs, powered up by some sort of strange artifact revolving around on its head. Because of the sheer size of this creature, its feet are the only thing that you'll actually be able to reach most of the time, but obviously slamming away at the monster's ankles can potentially be dangerous, with you likely getting trodden on down there. If you thought the last guy put up a decent light show, wait till you see what Captain Wisevoice can do. Not only having even more lasers to zap you with, but also now being able to completely pepper the room with lightning bolts, essentially turning the whole place into a wild electrical storm. You'll rely on using loads of energy strikes and shockwaves from a distance, resorting to ground slams or charge attacks whenever you're closer up. And none of this is made any easier with the boss also having a really cruel ace up his sleeve, letting out a big scream to put you into a curse state, which cuts down your maximum health while limiting how much you can gain back over a period of time, massively ramping up the pressure, with one mistake potentially being fatal. Smacking his feet is good enough for whittling away some of the boss's health, but you'll really want to maximise your damage output by rushing in whenever Captain Y's voice falls down, with that artifact weak spot now being exposed to your staff combos, letting you blitz through that health bar at a much faster pace. This is the key to winning this fight, as otherwise you'll be there all day slapping his legs, probably getting torn to pieces by everything that gets thrown at you. Not long after you fight the Macaque Chief for the second time, you'll run into Kang-Jin Star, having a chat with a guy who's lodged inside a big pair of symbols lodged inside a nearby rock face. If the name sounds a bit familiar, it's because she's actually that white dragon that we fought earlier on, but obviously in human form, now basically being the Wukong equivalent to Storm from the X-Men. Don't let the looks fool you, because although she doesn't seem anywhere near as intimidating as before, Kang-Jin Star will still be just about as unforgiving, conjuring up a lot more spells and electrical pulses. If you've got the ability to transform into a dragon, then it would seem a bit daft fighting solely as a human, so she will decide to switch to a dragon at times, albeit in a spectral form, floating around above your head to deliver ranged attacks from outside of your reach, occasionally throwing in the odd tail slam just to try and catch you out by surprise. The addition of shock damage makes this fight even riskier, boosting the damage output whenever you're under the shock status effect, which is probably going to be quite a lot, with many of her attacks being infused with electricity. She might be a bit easier to hit this time around, but she's still got the ability to phase across the arena and even float high up into the air, chucking loads of deadly projectiles your way while she hovers around from a safe distance. And partway through the fight, she'll summon a pretty brutal lightning storm which darkens the skies and generally puts her into a much more aggressive state till the end. Now being in a much worse mood, you can expect those attacks to come at you thick and fast, using all of her power to zap the living crap out of you, punishing your health bar while you're under that shock status. Kang-Jin Star's got even deadlier long and short range attacks, lobbing volleys of electrified spears at you from the air, but some of those attacks will quite literally drain her batteries, giving you ample time afterwards to rush forwards and deal some damage yourself, while she's charging up some of that energy again. Defeating Kang-Jin Star will force her to transform into a dragon and attempt to flee, though you'll grab a hold, causing her to smash into the big symbols, releasing the guy that she was talking to before, who happens to be a little pig guy called Jubaje, who's going to assist you on your journey from this point on. Easily one of the trickiest customers you'll be met with so far is Cyan Loong, another dragon boss that can be found not too long after defeating Kang-Jin Star, found fishing near the edge of the water along the right hand side of Turtle Island. Once again though, you're going to need that long scale for him to appear. The reason why Cyan Loong's going to put you to the test isn't because he's got a load of awkwardly timed attacks or lengthy combos, it's because getting hit by most of his strikes will pretty much wipe out insane amounts of your health, putting a hell of a lot more pressure on you to avoid his moves, thus forcing you to learn his attack combos to a T, in a way making this fight play out more so like a typical Souls-like than some of the other boss encounters. Thankfully he's not exactly got a wider range of attacks to throw at you, mainly whooshing in with his sword and using electrical bombs in shorter ranges. Also charging that sword up with lightning by slamming it into the ground. You'll definitely want to stay back if he's about to do this, by the way. The added peril of this fight means that you'll need to respect Cyan Loong a little bit more than usual, and I'd advise keeping your distance a bit more in this fight, rushing in to deal some damage after he's done a sweeping attack combo. Just don't get too greedy and remember to retreat to avoid getting pulverized by his next move. This fight isn't for the faint of heart, but once you nail down his moveset and get your timings right, it's not as ridiculous as it first might seem. A special boss fight can be triggered by wandering along the shoreline of the Bitter Lake and reaching the skeletal remains of a giant snake creature. Fortunately, that's not the thing that wants to fight you here, though you will be visited by the Apramana Bat, a big golden bat Buddha that flaps down from the sky, ready to give you a bit of trouble, acting in a similar way to its smaller, lesser Yao Guai counterparts. Being the big guy though, this dude's going to put up much more of a fight, attacking you more viciously from the air by slamming itself down and dive bombing to knock you down to the floor. With the bat spending a fair bit of time high up out of reach of your staff, sustaining damage on the boss isn't always going to be easy. Not made any better with it also wafting icy blasts at you over distance, freezing you solid if you get caught by the cold wind. Because the Apramana Bat can be such a slippery bugger that won't stay still, you might want to make good use of those rock solid and immobilize abilities, which will parry those slams and hold the boss in place unable to move. One thing to keep in mind while you're battering it on the ground though, is that the boss can also use its own rock solid ability move against you, curling up and turning a shinier golden colour, which will deflect your attacks and leave you open to getting hit by the Bat's wing. Apramana Bat is definitely a bit of a nuisance, but at least its health is fairly limited, and once you defeat the boss, it's going to fly away, unlocking its spirit ability, which you'll be able to use from the end of the chapter. To add yet another dragon boss to the list now, the next one you're probably going to run into from here is Chen Loong, who can be found paddling around in the water on the other side of the coastline. Now Chen Loong isn't inherently an evil guy, though just like nearly everyone else in Black Myth Wukong, he still fancies having a scrap with you, being in a bit of a grumpy mood. Not only is Chen Loong another dragon, he's also another dragon that loves to use electricity. He's not quite as punishing as Cyan Loong, but he can still whoop your ass if you're not careful, having a much wider variety of electrical attacks, relying more so on projectiles and power surges that can zap you over range. There's a lot of stuff that you'll need to watch out for in this one, as one moment the boss is zipping across the arena, discharging electricity in his wake, the next moment he's conjuring a load of whipping tails to emerge from the water, looking like he's just woken the bloody kraken. Shock damage is obviously going to play a big role in the dragon's attacks, making all those beams and lightning bolts all the deadlier. And with Chen Loong moving around so much, often floating up into the air to deliver strikes from above, he's not always going to be the easiest opponent to pin down. As soon as you beat him in the fight though, Chen Loong's going to throw a bit of a tantrum, soon becoming friendly towards you, but in desperate need of a resurrection pill from Zoodog. Of course, you can go and visit Zoodog in the cellars underneath Crouching Tiger Temple, and pick up this pill for him while you're there. Handing it over to Chen Loong is going to turn that frown upside down, and he'll give you his special scroll to grant you access to the Painted Realm, a place where Chen Loong and the other Zodiacs can chill out in peace, in a calm, tranquil hub area. The Painted Realm is also where we'll be able to find our next boss, though despite being a nice peaceful haven, the boss here is anything but nice and peaceful, bringing you a world of pain if you're unprepared, and probably even if you are prepared. The Yin Tiger is a blacksmith, and one of the Zodiac deities found in the village, acting like a typical store merchant at first glance, casually hammering away at his ridiculously oversized blade. Though by offering to challenge the Yin Tiger, you'll definitely be put to the challenge, with the Yin Tiger being an absolute menace and arguably being one of the toughest opponents in the game so far, if not the toughest. Despite being a simple sparring fight on the face of it, this guy's eager to win at all costs, using loads of relentless sword attacks and sweeping spins, with that massive blade being just about as deadly as it looks. What makes those sweeps, slams and combos all the worse though, is how they're all so awkwardly staggered, tricking you into dodging early, plus allowing the boss to brutalise your health bar after mistiming your escape. Yin Tiger can also do a few sneaky moves where he vanishes into the air, only to phase around the arena and strike you from unexpected angles, which is kind of ironic considering this guy moans at you for using skills like Immobilize, saying that you should fight with honour, while he goes on to use cheap tricks like this. Speaking of Immobilize, he can break out of it as soon as you hit him, so my advice would be to build up some focus points first, and then charge up a heavy attack to make it as impactful as possible. This isn't really one of those fights where you can just wing it and get away with bombarding the boss with spells, as you're going to need to nail down the timing of his attack patterns and think tactically about pretty much every move. You're probably going to lose a lot, unless you've come back to this fight after leveling up more, but Yin Tiger is definitely worth beating earlier on if you can, giving you some pretty sweet rewards for his defeat. So as you venture through the Valley of Ecstasy, you might not find any hippies, but you will find a crazy looking bald dude called Non-White, a bit of a weird guy with yellow spines sticking out from his skin, armed with a thin bladed weapon that can be twirled around. Non-White can lash out with quick blade flurries and jumping strikes, rolling around the place with a decent level of agility. But because his weapon's infused with frost, this not only lets him use ice attacks against you, but it also allows him to block off a lot of your own staff hits, with that blade also acting like a frosty shield, giving Non-White a second health bar which can be found sitting on top of the normal one. You don't need to worry about this fight going on forever though, as once you whittle the boss's health down to just under half, he's going to abandon ship and disappear from the scene, just like that sneaky macaque. The fight's been won, but the war certainly isn't over, as Non-White's going to be waiting for you further along the path, with his health being topped up back to full again. How convenient. The first phase was just a bit of a warm-up, being a much tougher opponent the second time around, as although he's going to use a lot of the same sort of attacks and combos, he's also going to switch between frost and toxic stances, with those toxic attacks being faster and more aggressive, as he splits his blade into two, now dual-wielding a pair of poisonous spikes. Non-White's going to be diving around all over the place like a kid that's had too many Skittles, using lots of different slashing combos, swapping between elemental stances on the fly. A pretty interesting boss, having several different ways to spice up the fight. Another chapter, another big frog. This one's going to give you a bit of a frosty reception though, with it basically being the ice variant, found chilling out on a little frozen pond not too far away from the Forest of Felicity Shrine. Aside from doing all the typical frog stuff, pouncing on you over distance and swinging that tongue all over the place, this guy's also got a bunch of other moves, many of which inflict frost damage, slowing down your movements and even freezing you in place if that frost status builds up. Lang-Li-Guhh-Lang's going to create icy clouds pretty much everywhere it goes, giving you more to watch out for as you navigate around the arena. It's able to conjure up a load of spiky exploding ice fragments, littering the battlefield as they shatter, now even having the ability to lob giant frost balls at you as it whips that tongue around, giving this frog even more reach with those sweeping attacks. But probably the biggest thing you'll need to watch out for here is when the boss tries to trap you into a big icy ring, putting you into a vulnerable position as you're hammering the frog with those close range combos, with it not only freezing the ground to build up that frost status, but also letting out an earth shattering screech, a really powerful shockwave attack that'll punch through your health if you're still hanging around close by. It's not the toughest fight in the world, just like the other frog bosses, as that limited health can be easily whittled away using all your spells and combat skills. So harvesting the local flora is a pretty normal thing to do in Black Myth Wukong, and by now you'll probably know that some of those plants are actually monsters hiding underground, tempting you over with their flowery heads. If you move through a gate leading to a frozen swamp with a big monument, you'll notice that there's a load of ginseng plants sprouted all over the place. Some of these are legit, some of them are nasty creatures, though one of them turns out to be a big beastie plant grandad, with old Ginseng Guai popping up from out of the soil, not very happy that you tried to steal his back herbs. He's a bit of a stompy bloke that'll clumsily wave his arms and legs around, stumbling around everywhere like a drunk guy in a bar brawl, slamming into the ground, generally using his body weight to do most of the damage. Though with him being a beefed up version of those smaller ginseng monsters, he's going to use similar attacks to them too, pushing his arms into the ground, growing a load of poisonous roots in close proximity, slowing down your movements and putting you under that pesky toxic status effect. It turns out that being a head honcho of all the plant people in the area, the old Ginseng Guai will sometimes choose to stand back, summoning a bunch of minions to do the dirty work for him. Having more things to attack and distract you can definitely create problems, so you might want to deal with some of those smaller enemies first before they manage to overwhelm you with the big boss. If you wander up to the top of the hill near the Brook of Bliss shrine, you'll find a tall Buddha dude with his arms tied up, kneeling down in the middle of a wide snowy clearing. Just because his hands are bound together, that doesn't mean that you should take Non-Able's name literally, because Non-Able is still very able to kick the crap out of you if you get too complacent, with him chaining a bunch of kicks and slams together, flying around through the air like a kung fu champ. His attacks are slightly staggered and delayed, which makes dodging them all the trickier to do, hitting you hard and fast without too much time to react, breaking your staff combos and knocking you down to the floor. The fact that this guy can slap you around so effortlessly with his feet makes it pretty awkward to get close and sustain a decent amount of damage in one go. But once you chip away the last bit of his health, he's not going to die and wither away into a cloud of dust like the other bosses. He's actually going to break free of his bindings instead, letting the real boss battle commence with that first little segment simply just being a bit of a fun little warm-up for him. With a fresh bar of health and a pair of hands to help him out this time, you can expect this second phase to be even tougher, with Non-Able now throwing in a bunch of new moves, combining kicks and punches in some pretty gnarly combos, blasting the air in front of him to extend his attacks even further. Multi-stage boss fights can be a bit more frustrating at times, looking at you White-Clad Noble, but Non-Able's health pool isn't anything overly high, and he's still quite vulnerable to getting duped by all your spells and abilities. One of the most secretive bosses in Chapter 3 can be found after performing a few different tasks in the region. First of all, you'll need to speak to a treasure hunter after saving him from a bunch of enemies near a temple near the Bitter Lake. Then you'll need to find the treasure hunter again near the Towers of Karma Shrine, and use your Ring of Fire spell to keep him warm. And then you'll literally need to jump off a cliff, near the edge of a frozen lake, navigating your way downwards to find an elusive place called the Melon Field. As it turns out, that treasure hunter that you've been helping out all this time is a bit of a prick, disguising himself as some sort of unfortunate lost tourist, when he's actually the green-cap Martialist, an avid fighter who's lured you into a bit of a trap. Armed with a fiery hula hoop of death, this guy's got a lot of fancy flame-based attacks and abilities, waving that hoop around and flinging it through the air, with it acting both as a melee weapon and a launched projectile that can be whizzed around the place to hit you over distance. Sometimes it can even expand in size and spin around the room to strike you as it rolls across the floor, leaving a fiery path in its wake while it constantly tries to run you over. That's not the only magic this guy can use against you, also multiplying himself and his weapon in several different moves, including the one where he makes that giant flame hoop try to hunt you down, putting your multitasking skills to the test, having several deadly things to keep an eye on at once. Along with all the energy beams, fireballs and vanishing tricks he likes to use on you, unfortunately he's a boss that doesn't take too kindly to magic being used on him, breaking free of Immobilize practically straight away. Beating the green cap Martialist will cause him to retreat like a coward, diving headfirst into a funky black hole. And that's the end of that. Anyway, back onto the main story path again. As you run up a big hill to reach the massive gates of New Thunderclap Temple, you'll be greeted by one of the freakiest looking things in the whole region. A giant mystical being with its body looking like a weird meaty flower, standing on a pair of long pale legs. Probably not exactly the kind of thing you'd expect to see every day. If you do, you might want to lay off the shrooms. This is Captain Kalpa-Wave, the last captain boss in the chapter, guarding the temple entrance, making sure that a sneaky monkey like yourself doesn't wander through. Although this thing looks about as intimidating as they get, Kalpa-Wave hasn't really got the power to back up its menacing appearance, being one of the easier fights of the chapter and one of the worst bosses you could assign as a gatekeeper. The majority of Captain Kalpa-Wave's attacks come in the form of stomps and kicks, most of which are fairly simple to read and dodge, while you're slapping those legs with that staff. Aside from trying to avoid a big pair of legs, you'll also need to avoid a load of blood projectiles too, which are often discharged from the monster's body throughout the fight, hunting you down through the air as they lock onto your position. You will need to be careful not to stand in the pools of blood for too long, which form on the ground after some of the boss's attacks, as this is going to cause your health to melt away, probably without you even being aware. But for the most part, Captain Kalpa-Wave's probably going to be humiliated by your onslaught of attacks and spells, not really being a boss that you need to worry about. Okay, so although you can just rock up to the next boss encounter and take him on straight away, I'm first going to show you how to get a secret reaction out of him when you arrive. If you walk over to the gateway near the Forest of Felicity shrine, you'll be able to interact with a fox carcass draped over the shoulders of a corpse. This will grant you the ability to transform into the fox, and turning up to the non-void fight as the fox will give you a different dialogue set. Plus it'll also give you a reward for defeating the boss once you return to the fox carcass again. Aside from that little bit of extra information though, Non-Void is one of the many monks that can be found inside New Thunderclap Temple, basically on the far left side of the temple after reaching the central area up a few flights of stairs. Although this guy isn't too much to look at, he's a surprisingly awkward boss to deal with, having 4 slight powers, the ability to phase around the place like a ghost, while being able to manipulate the environment around him using some sort of spiritual energy. Having those ghostly abilities makes him temporarily invincible, being able to slip away from your staff combos while avoiding taking heavy damage from your focus charge moves, being a much harder target to pin down than some of the other bosses, not helped out by the fact that he's also immune to your immobilize spell too. You'll spend a fair bit of time hanging back, conjuring up whirlwinds of leaves to come chase you around the arena, while lobbing energy balls at you over distance, giving you several things to try and avoid at once. So if you do manage to get up close for a few melee strikes, you've got to watch out for him countering your moves with his own. Not exactly a very simple fight, also one that can get a bit frustrating if you're impatient, especially if you're having to travel ages to get to it again if you die, with the nearest shrine being a fair trek away. So there's one more of those non-type bosses yet to defeat, and that's non-pure. Found pretty deep within New Thunderclap Temple, near a big courtyard where you'll need to beat 2 dark-faced overlords. Surprise surprise, this dude's another angry monk, though he's arguably less of a pain in the backside than the others, despite probably looking the meanest, being a beefy bloke with a huge polearm weapon, looking like he's just stolen the Infinity Gauntlet from Thanos. That's not to say that non-pure can't be dangerous, having several long-winded attack combos, far-reaching jabs, and deadly sweeping strikes. But he's also one of those bosses that can get overwhelmed by your spells, having less ways to defend himself along with a fairly limited amount of health. I guess he can block some of your attacks off using that gauntlet, but you should probably be able to deal damage to this guy a lot easier, with a lot of his polearm strikes being somewhat predictable, though still potentially punishing if you dodge at the wrong time and get locked into one of those ongoing melee combos. I suppose if you were softened up a bit first before this fight by the 2 giant overlords, then non-pure might have enough strength to finish you off. But otherwise, it's a pretty basic one compared to most of the other bosses. Easily the weirdest looking monk in the temple has to be the monk from the sea, a freaky looking guy with a bunch of tentacles growing out from his back and chest. You'll probably have seen lesser Yao Guai variants of this dude wandering around the region, and they're already pretty tough enemies to contend with as they are. Though this is probably the one that will cause you the biggest headache. Not because he throws loads of different moves at you or attacks in a very different way to the others, but it's because those attacks dish out even more damage, along with the fact that this amped up boss variant's also got a lot more health than the standard variants too. The monk from the sea can be found along the right side of the New Thunderclap Temple, and he's mainly going to lash out with those tentacles, lunging forwards and whipping them around, sometimes even lobbing snowballs at you to extend his range even further. Some of his blizzard attacks are going to rapidly build up freeze damage, putting you in a really vulnerable position if you get frozen in place, down to his onslaught of tentacle strikes battering your health bar in just a few quick moves. You've really got to nail down the timing of your dodges in this fight, with those stretchy Dr. Octavia style tentacles being able to slap you around over a pretty long distance. Not an easy boss in the slightest, but still one that's worth defeating, giving you access to a new transformation spell. So the final boss of the whole chapter is actually a really long multi-phase fight with lots of different crazy and somewhat confusing parts to it. But the main bad guy that you'll be taking on is a massive Buddha called Yellowbrow, who's basically been deceiving you throughout the chapter, assuming the form of the little Buddha kid Maitreya. He can be found behind the massive doors at the very top of the temple, and the first stage of the fight is fairly straightforward, with Yellowbrow just being a big guy with a huge electrical mace, which is mainly going to be used to slam down on you from above and generate thunder energy, with attacks that can travel both along the ground and through the air. The big Buddha's going to use the good old vanish and reappear trick throughout this stage of the fight, allowing him to retreat when you've got him on the ropes. But aside from one really destructive insta-kill move where he discharges all of his energy in a massive blast, something I'd advise staying the hell away from or using the wind vessel to interrupt, a lot of Yellowbrow's other moves are kinda slow and not too hard to read and dodge, with him being such a big lumbering target it's not too hard to chase down. Completing this phase is just the start, as running Yellowbrow's health down isn't going to kill him, it's going to let him stun you to initiate the next stage of the fight. Now this is where things start to get a little bit trippy, as you're going to get pulled into the boss's magical bag, where you're going to see your little pig buddy having a scrap with the Macaque Chief. Obviously, they've also been put into that bag too. Here you'll get the opportunity to finish the macaque off for good, shifting focus away from Yellowbrow at this point in time, and after having fought this pesky dude a few times already, you should probably have an idea on what to expect. Though with the macaque now being enhanced by the sack's magic, and having sprouted a pair of wings, he's going to be much more aggressive here than in the past, using several new tricks to try and get the better of you. Aside from that deadly blade swinging around all over the place, he's also going to send out shadow versions of himself to aid him in combat, which don't have a load of health, but can still use a lot of the same sort of attacks as the main boss. The macaque's also going to float around and dive in using those wings, giving him a few extra moves that can be trickier to see coming. But once you take care of this guy for good, you're magically going to get transformed into the macaque, and you'll be pulled out of the bag by Yellowbrow, to be left running around the room, destroying a load of animated ornament Buddhas that stand in your way. Eventually you'll reach a shrunken down Yellowbrow in one final area, which is arguably the trickiest segment of the battle. That mace is going to come out again to be slammed around, with electricity shooting out all over the place, and a fair few of these attacks might look pretty familiar. You've got to be really patient in this phase, not being tempted to rely on those spells, with those pluck of many clones turning against yourself, and with Immobilize putting Yellowbrow into a golden shielded state, making him temporarily invincible. You can expect tons of different lightning strikes to come flying at you, along with the typical vanishing tricks used in the very first round, with this part of the fight playing out like an even more ferocious version of that first round, but with even more things that'll trick and frustrate you. Overall, this Yellowbrow fight is a pretty wild ride, but thankfully you won't need to do the entire multi-phase battle without dying. Defeating the boss once and for all in the final part will end the chapter, giving you access to another relic. Job well done. So that's it for this pretty long guide on Chapter 3 Black Myth Wukong bosses. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, you know what to do. And remember to subscribe to see more guides on the other bosses on my channel. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and I'll be seeing you in that next one.